I have the easiest task in today's event. I have been asked to introduce a personality who needs no introduction. Many of us know Sri Rajiv Malhotra from the Huffington Post, where he's a prolific columnist. Many of us know him from the Infinity Foundation that he founded in 1995 to foster a dialogue, a healthy dialogue between Dharma and the Abrahamic traditions. Many of us know him from the Waves conferences, where he presents so spellboundingly on paradigm-changing theories, and really it's something we all have a lot of admiration for. Many of us do not know that Sri Rajiv Malhotra, at the height of his career as a telecom and tech entrepreneur, he retired at the age of 44. He did that so that he could serve the cause of Dharma and the cause of reaching that important dialogue phase between Dharma and the Abrahamic traditions, which often gets misunderstood, misquoted, and often is distorted as well. So without much further ado, I would like to invite Sri Rajiv Malhotra.
This is a very important occasion, being the 10th anniversary of September 11. I thought I'd start by giving a comment on that occasion and how it relates to my work. 9/11, I think, says something that relates to what my research on this book is also saying, that there can be a potential threat from a foreign nexus, which is what 9/11 was, an attack from a foreign nexus of a kind which even a nation as strong as the US had not anticipated. So you may have strong defenses, you may be protected against all kinds of things that you can predict and anticipate, but what you have not anticipated could be so bizarre and could be so strange that if and when that happens, it can be quite dramatic. That's 9/11. And this book talks about similar possibilities that may face India. So there is a bit of a link in that respect. But a stronger link is that as an American, as a proud American, I am concerned about the national integrity and security of this country, as I am for the national integrity and security of India. And it is clear to me that US foreign policy makers who read this book will be convinced of the importance of India as a partner of the United States in this war against terror. And in order to have a partner as strong, as solid as India, it's therefore important for the US policy to make sure it is supporting the Indian civilization's backbone, which is the Vedic backbone, and not undermining it. There may have been programs during the Cold War to undermine it very deliberately. And even though policy towards India has become favorable in business investments and political matters, some of these old programs still continue because people haven't turned them off. And some of them have gone worse. So the book actually is one of the audiences. People ask me, what is the audience the book for whom is it? And there's many people for whom it is. And one of the audiences I would like, I have not yet managed to get it into their hands, but one of the audiences I would very much like is the US policymakers, who need to understand that any program from the West which may undermine India, be it radical conversions, be it interventions under various garbs, will in fact undermine an ally, and that's the wrong thing to do. And the book is about three nexuses, foreign nexuses that are threatening India in different ways, or are not always very explicitly and overtly, sometimes they are, but also by appropriating Indian minorities to become sort of loyal to them and work against India while remaining in India and being Indian. And that's very insidious. It's a very insidious kind of undermining. I discuss a nexus of radical Islam that would like to create what they have called Mughalistan, which would be from Afghanistan to Bangladesh, further on, all the way through North India, a recreation of the old Mughal Empire. This kind of a nexus is there. That's what the head of the Mullah Omar Taliban head once made a speech saying that the end game is to put their flag on the Red Fort of Delhi. That was their end game. And they have, as we keep finding more and more India-based assets. And so it is an issue that we have to always be cognizant of. There is also a nexus from China, because they have a very strong influence via Nepal to Maoists all over India now. And this nexus of China-inspired and politically kind of ideologically inspired Maoist movements is a nexus that can undermine India. And the third nexus is West-sponsored and inspired and managed and funded missionary work and leftist work that is based on the approach towards human rights, which undermines the integrity of India. So these are the three nexuses that the book talks about. But in the American context, the primary nexus is the third one. And I feel that there is a bit of a schizophrenic or contradictory policy on the part of the US, which the book tries to bring out and try to make policymakers reflect on it and change it. On the one hand, India is a friend, as I mentioned, in many dimensions. And on the other hand, this particular type of activity continues. And of course, the government can say, we are not doing it, there are private people doing it, and there are human rights people doing it. But the point is, the government knows about it. The government, in fact, the US government in many ways indirectly encourages this sort of thing. And my thesis is that this is bad US foreign policy, and I make this claim as an American wanting US policy to be good for the United States. I make the claim that this is actually bad for the United States, because weakening India's civilizational unity and integrity and sense of cohesion will not make it good for the US. In fact, it will invite the other two foreign nexuses into greater positions of power, and that's not in the best interest of India. When I say breaking India, what is being broken that I refer to is a unified sense of history. What is being broken is the sampradayas, the paramparas, the sense of continuity, that we are one. With all the diversity, we are unified. We have the tirthas, we have the sacred geography with mountains and rivers. The sense that we have a collective destiny and we are together for a long time. Breaking this down, breaking down the symbols, disabusing some of the spiritual traditions, has become more than just a pastime for certain people in the academy, and some think tanks, certainly some churches. And so the breaking down I'm talking about is breaking the psychological sense of unity. And once people have lost that psychological sense of unity, then they're not as unified in defending it, as strongly committed to fighting for it. The sense of identity can be broken. I'm showing that many strange identities have been created, which are small, tiny, minority identities, and they are made to fight each other and against the nation. So these sub-identities or fragmented identities are also a threat to the nation. And many instances exist where the first breakdown of a nation is psychological, sense of history, sense of unity, and then the physical violence and separatism can be triggered out of that. Once the youth are convinced that my problems are because of all the others who are not like me, and I have to fight them, and my problems are because their ancestors have always oppressed my ancestors, this kind of a negative history, it breeds a sense of violence, or it makes it easy to sort of slip into something that is not unifying for the nation. So that's the sense of breaking India that I'm talking about. And this can turn into a physical breakdown. It can turn into a geopolitical, physical, military kind of activity if it is not contained. Today, a very large number of districts in India have some insurrection, some separatist movement, some militant movement, and it's bringing down the GDP of India by some percent. And if you look at the effect, cumulative effect of bringing down the GDP of a country by 2-3% over 60 years, 70 years, it is a huge amount. I mean, the compound effect of 1 or 2% over 50, 60 years means that our GDP could have been double, triple if we didn't have that 2% loss due to the internal fragmentation. So just because we kept the country together doesn't mean that the problem is not serious. We kept it together, but at what cost? And is this cost getting worse every year? Those are some of the issues that I'd like people to read, and it'll provoke you to think. I also had a radio interview this morning here in Dallas, and wonderful gentleman with a small 10-minute slot he had. So the question he asked was, how does all this relate to Vedic Dharma? That was his question. And I said that the way you have to see this is that the Mahabharata is still going on. This is the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is still going on. That is what the geopolitics of today is. And the Kurukshetra is not just a town in Haryana like it once was, but the globe is the Kurukshetra. This is a global Kurukshetra, and there is a war going on, and there is Dharma and there is Adharma. And so just as Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that it is not enough to just go onto your own and look for your own moksha and so on, you also have this Dharma and this duty to fight in this Kurukshetra. So also we have this duty in different capacities to get engaged in this issue of the mother India that we sang for being under threat. And that is why this is not something that should be off limits for spiritually minded, religiously minded people to discuss. Often we have people who say, well, you know, I don't believe in all these things, and they have a kind of an escapist, otherworldly attitude. And that's unfortunate because it means we really cannot mobilize enough people to even speak out loudly. So that's just to give you kind of a bird's eye view. Now, the work that led to this book has been going on research-wise for over a decade. I have always been interested for a long time in this whole Aryan-Dravidian issue, the debate. And I've always been reading on how this was an artificial creation. This Dravidian identity was an artificial creation during the early 1800s. The Germans created this sense of Aryan because they needed it to create their own German and European identity. And this is all explained in the early chapters of the book. And then some British missionaries in South India took that Aryan identity and against it created the non-Aryan and called it the Dravidian identity. And it started as a linguistic separation. Then a few years later they turned it into, the culture was different because they had different ideas and values and symbols, that's what they claimed. Then they turned it into race, that's a different race. You know, India has got these different races. Then they turned it into religion. And so thus was born a whole Dravidianism movement which dominates politics in South India. Now, recently, the Dravidian movement, which is no longer sort of secular as it was, there's a huge takeover by Christianity. The church is appropriating the Dravidian identity and creating something called Dravidian Christianity. If you search Dravidian Christianity, there's a lot being written on it, a lot of activism, a lot of youth empowerment and training going on, PhD dissertations in some universities in South India producing this kind of idea of Dravidian identity. So this has been an area of interest of mine. And in 2005, there was a conference in New York, and they've now had 5 of these. I think it was either 2005 or 3, it's in the book, the exact detail. And Senator Hillary Clinton sent her blessing and support for the conference, that this conference will show the true history of India, kind of thing. And the conference was on the true history of South Indian religions. That was the conference. And it was heavily funded by Dravidianists and Christians in alliance. And paper after paper, we have an appendix which summarizes what all these papers are saying. Paper after paper was trying to show that the Tirukural and the Shaiva Siddhanta, which are the 2 great Tamil classics, are actually after Christ, after Jesus' period, and they're heavily influenced by Christianity. And then the argument was made that they're actually St. Thomas comes and he creates these, or he dictates Jesus' teachings, and the Tamilians are not bright enough to get it properly, so they distort it, and that becomes the Tamil classics. So in other words, the Tamil classics, according to this thesis, are kind of a degraded version of Christianity. Of course, this means that you might as well purify that Christianity and get the real stuff. That is the message that they're trying to convey. So this launched a Dravidian Christianity movement. It's ironic that when this whole St. Thomas theory was first proposed long ago in the 1800s, the Vatican condemned it as useless history, bad history, bogus history, fraud and all that. That's pretty much on the record. And a few people later in India who had assumed this Dravidian identity, they sort of continued perpetuating it. But in the last 15-20 years, this distorted history became very convenient because it does the job. Whether it is true or not is less important to them. It does the job. So now the Western nexuses are promoting this. They're making movies on it, and they're trying to change when the holidays are held, and they're trying to Christianize the Tamil language and history and sense of identity. So through Dravidianism is a root of Christianity that has become extremely large, extremely powerful. To give you an example, Kanyakumari district, where my co-author lives, is now more than 50% converted. In the last 10 years, converted. It's a very sacred place for a lot of Hindus, but it's converted. That's pretty drastic and pretty sudden. So this type of thing I've been tracking for a long time. And then another thing that interacted with this is about a decade ago, I was having lunch in Princeton. There were some scholars, and then one gentleman drops in and joins us, and he was introduced to me, and he says that he's just come from India, and he was, so I asked him, what were you doing? And very casually he says that he's gone as part of the Afro-Dalit movement. So I said, well, what is this Afro-Dalit movement? I've never heard of such a thing. So he said, oh, Afro-Dalit movement, you know, we are teaching the history of the Dalits, that they are actually blacks, and the non-Dalits are the whites, and the white-black slavery experience of the United States can be used to interpret their slavery experience in India. So they're trying to teach them that. So I got quite concerned. I figured, you know, wow, this must be either a crackpot or maybe something strange. And so I kind of got to know him and went to his office, and on his wall was hanging the map of a balkanized India with a Dravidstan, Dalittstan, Mughalistan, all of that, which is on the cover of this book. So this map is not something we made up. It is a real map that exists in the minds of certain people. And if you go to Dalittstan.org, Dalittstan.org, you will see this map. You can download it. And this guy had it on his wall. So in fact, the map, I wanted this map on the book because that's trying to highlight what this story is about. And just a short while before the book was to come out, the publisher calls me very panicked that, you know, this map might create trouble, legal department has to clear it, they're having problems. So they first of all made it small, because the previous cover design we had, the map was the whole cover of the book was this map, not a little one. And they also put, I've never seen this done before, they put a little disclaimer at the bottom saying that this map is not a true map, just to sort of cover themselves. So, of course, no problem happened. That we're lucky for that, otherwise it would just be a hassle. But this, we were scared that, you know, we have, so in other words, rather than defying, challenging, confronting such an idea of fragmentation, the tendency has been to be in denial mode, to try and look the other side and pretend it's not there, to be afraid to talk about it. It's like, you know, if we are scared so much that we don't even want to face the issue, we don't even want to admit the issue. That's the kind of psychology I found among the publishers in India. So I insisted that, you know, you've got to put the map on the cover. They put a little smaller one, but at least they put it. And when you get the book, you will see this, what this map is saying. And when you go to Dalittstan.org, you can download it for yourself. So you can imagine, more than a decade ago, what kind of an impact it must have had on me to discover all this. So I decided I better find out more, you know, who are these people? Why are they, who's sending them to India? What are they doing? Who funds it? What's their game plan? So through this guy, he was very nice. You know, a lot of them are very innocently sucked into this. They're not necessarily vicious people. There's some people who have got a game plan, but a lot of naive people get sucked into these things. So he was telling me that so-and-so organized it and the names of various institutions here and there. So I would keep following up on who's who, and then I would try to discover various organizations. And then I found who else supports this Afro-Dalit concept. And they tend to be the same people who are also supporting Christian Dravidianism. So this Dravidianism being Christianized and this Dalitism being Christianized is a common kind of an agenda. There is a tendency to try and merge these two into an overall program and to go into different parts of India and do and sell whichever one works. In North India, Dravidianism won't work, but Christian Dalitism will work. In Tamil Nadu, Christian Dravidianism works. So they try to do whatever works, but there's an overarching, cohesive view of all this. Now, in discovering, I wanted to follow the money trail of these organizations, because in the US there is not only a Freedom of Information Act, but if you are a non-profit registered, then there is a requirement that a common citizen can ask for disclosure, and you have to disclose your things. And there is also something called guidestar.com, which you may not know about. Guidestar.com is a site where, if you're a member, you can look up any non-profit organization's filings, IRS filings, that tell you where the money comes from, where the money goes. And so I started doing a lot of investigative work. Following the money trail, you know, I wanted to look for who are the organizations sending large amounts of money to India. And then I wanted to get some help in India. I hired some people there to go around to the village areas and see what do they do with this money. And this way, linking the US as a source of money and source of ideology, training, political campaigning, lobbying, and the places in India which are carrying out the work. And I try to connect the two and make the whole thesis. I went to several international events where these strategies were being discussed. Either myself or someone else would represent me. And in India, since I don't know Tamil, I got some people to go and get into these events and bring back their leaflets, translate them, send them to me. So I could get some real empirical research data which we can substantiate. The conclusion we reached is that there is a global nexus with headquarters outside India and operating branches or operating NGOs within India. And these work like parent headquarters with subsidiaries. They work in the same kind of a way. The headquarters they develop the ideology, they send people for training with nice names like youth empowerment, women's empowerment, these kind of nice names. But the actual content of the training is what I would consider to be anti-national, because it is certainly a breaking India type of a thesis that they're teaching in terms of history and spiritual or religious identity and things of that sort. The international nexus also plays the role of protecting these activities in international circles, in the United Nations, Washington, London, Brussels. They give funding, they give them a lot of political support so that internationally this thing remains hot. They run media networks to keep circulating these stories about whatever is happening in a certain place that they want to promote and publicize. So the activities of the international nexus and the activities of the local people are, the local groups within India are coordinated. And since I come from a multinational background in my corporate days, I know how corporate headquarters does things to manipulate or manage the subsidiaries in its own, according to its own needs, while making it look like it's hands-off, autonomous, everybody has to be given freedom, but there are subtle ways to do it. So I can figure out when something of this sort is going on. Now, in the process, I started gathering a large amount of literature on such people. Often, I would write to somebody and say, oh, I am interested in your marvelous range of India activities. Can you tell me what are you doing in India? They would send me a big box of literature. So it is not like I had to go like a spy and all that. It was like you call them and say, you know, or you join there, you can join. You join as a member, you give them $50, you join, they put you on their list. And then they keep sending you that we have this program, this youth training program, that program, and then you say, oh, I have a friend, he will join you. They'll invite him also. So it is a very open, information is very open. And so I have not done anything that anyone else couldn't have done. It's just a lot of hard work to go running around compiling so much data. But the data is available. So that's the good thing about it, because when we make a statement, we can substantiate it. And in most cases, the organization we're talking about will say, yeah, we think this is good stuff, we are doing it, what's wrong with it? We should be doing it, we are liberating those people, we're giving them human rights, we are, you know, so their ideological spin is so convincing to them that they don't think there's any need to do this secretly. They are not, they're quite open about it, that this is their game plan. It's just that when you put it so convincingly together in a cohesive work, and then show it to them, then they get kind of rattled that you know, you've exposed them in a sense. But if you were to ask them, are you sending this money, are you doing this program, that program, they'll say, yeah, we're very happy we're doing all this. So I started compiling, and what was started out as a bookshelf filled with binders and material became a whole bookcase with so much volume, and then more than that. So I started hiring student interns to scan this, and we'll go put it online so we can search and look for patterns and whatnot. And then eventually I hired people in South India to track things at that end. So this is the first time ever that a research was done based in the US and in India, coordinating the data to find out this global nexus. It's never been done. I mean, if you look at South Asian studies, in Madison, University of Wisconsin, Madison, they have a conference called South Asian Studies every year. This is the 40th year, this October, I think. You know, they have between 500 and 1,000 papers presented. It's going on for 40 years, so it's a long thing. And there's one in Berkeley. So I wanted to find out, what do these guys do? Who funds them, and what is their view on all these things? And I started buying old proceedings. And then they started wondering, who is this guy that wants to buy all these proceedings from old? Usually people buy 1 year or 2 years, but not so many years. When we did this project, we bought 33 years worth of proceedings. And some of them we had to buy through other intermediate names, so that you wouldn't think that it's just one guy trying to compile. Because the mere fact that somebody is investigating me, studying me, makes me nervous. That's how people are. Just being told that we are, if you just call them up and say, I'd like to study how your conference has been studying certain things on India, not studying certain things, what kind of spin, what kind of lens, what kind of ideological framework, epistemic framework, hermeneutics do you use, what are the conclusions you reach, are they fair, not fair, what is the implication, how it shapes US policy, how it drives certain kind of behavior. If you tell them that, while it is totally within your means to do that, they're not going to cooperate. I've tried that. I've been to the Ford Foundation office in Delhi, huge wall like it's a fortress, but because I know people, I got appointments, and I said what I would like is, you just published this many years ago, you just published your 25th anniversary or some 50th anniversary, some big anniversary they were celebrating, and they had a nice brochure that they have put out billions of dollars of funding and a lot of programs they've done. So I said, is there a library where all the reports are written from all your programs? And I'd like to stay here for a few days and go through all the reports you produce, because after all, if the purpose is to produce reports, then the output, the final product is your library of reports. That is what you are proud of. So it would be wonderful if I could write a book on what the Ford Foundation has done as an independent guy. And they're very nervous. They all said, oh, I can't do this, I have to get this guy's permission, that guy's permission. I went round and round Ford Foundation, and the final official policy was, we do not keep a copy of the reports in India. Yeah. So I said, my God. I mean, if I were a government person, I would say if somebody is operating in my country, bringing all this money, giving here, there, where, I have to have somebody take a look at what are they doing? What is the net result of what they're doing? So, and at least some enterprising, scientist or a scholar in social sciences or something like that, or international relations, should make a dissertation out of it. It would be fantastic. But I just couldn't get any people excited. So I started doing this research on various international organizations and think tanks and events and conferences. I found that there is a Joshua project in Denver, which is funded by a whole consortium of churches. And they have, at the district level, for all the 600 or so districts in India, district by district level, they have a more detail about demographics, religion, economy, age, caste, this, that. They have more details than the Indian census. They have more details than the government of India has. And it is all public. I have a whole book, 1,000-page book. I went and bought it from somewhere. And it gives you a kind of a who's who among the various communities, who gets along with whom, who fights with whom, like that. So, and who you can win, who need, where our marketing is being successful, what is the percentage of penetration, and who are the people with the least market penetration from our side. It is so brilliant that as somebody who worked in corporate marketing, I tell you, if Coca-Cola or IBM or anybody had such detailed market knowledge about their market, it would be considered brilliant marketing. And I don't think any multinational knows the whole country so detailed as these guys did. So this is very amazing. And then I came across Dalit Freedom Network, based in Denver also. And Dalit Freedom Network is quoted a lot in the news that they are promoting some Dalit stuff and like that. And I wanted to find out who they are. So I did some detailed work. Most of the guys behind it, who created it, who are trustees, who give money, not one of them is an Indian or a Dalit. They are all white Christians. So it amazed me that basically a group of white Christians want to champion Dalits far away in India. Wow, this is very exciting. And then some of them are linked with various senators and congressmen. They're linked with church groups. There's one, forgotten his name, he's one of the Republican guys. Rick Santorum?
Yes. Rick Santorum.
He's on this book, in this book. He's part of something like that, issuing statements, resolutions, supporting such activities. So our book is very open. I mean, we have no problem saying, okay, this is what we found out about you, and we put it there. So we found a large number of strange and people that you don't think are great lovers of India. I mean, they're not doing it because of great lovers of India, but there's some kind of an ideological reason for doing it. So Dalit Freedom Network has a few poster boys like Kanchan Ilaya and people like that who they bring in. So they have a brown skin face and they go around giving talks. They give them awards. Kanchan Ilaya, for those of you who don't know, is a very radical anti-Hindu. He wrote a book called Why I'm Not a Hindu. And now he's written a book called Post-Hindu India. Yeah. So he's predicting post-Hindu India. So what I'm telling you, some people say, "Arey Nene, you are blaming people." I'm saying, listen, the guys I'm talking about are writing books on it. You don't have to believe me. You can just see the bibliography at the end, which is 50, 60, 70 pages long bibliography. You can just go read all these stuff. We're mostly quoting what these guys are saying. We're not quoting some Hindu type sources at all, ever. We're quoting what these guys are saying. So, and in fact, it's very ironic. Kanchan Ilaya gets funded to fly around all these fancy places, give talks, gets awards. Conferences like, I remember, Asian Studies, Association of Asian Studies, very difficult for a guy like me to get in and present a paper, but Kanchan Ilaya, big shot, they are being honored all the time. And many courses in the US, Introduction to Hinduism 101, reading list is Why I'm Not a Hindu by Kanchan Ilaya. The introduction. Now you would not, of course, you should have intellectual freedom, academic freedom, you should teach the opposing points of view. But when you're introducing a religion, you should introduce it based on what the people who believe in it claim. You should at least introduce it based on its own understanding, self-understanding, and then you can criticize it and all you want. I also found that the National Endowment of Humanities If you go to my website and you, there's in infinityfoundation.com, there's one button called Mandala. If you click, you go to another website which we created many years ago called Mandala, which has inner gate, outer gate, these kind of things. And in one of those 4 gates, I've forgotten which one, there's a whole critique we've done of this Ramayana, course on Ramayana, funded by National Endowment of Humanities when Lynn Cheney, who was wife of Dick Cheney, was the head of National Endowment of Humanities. Either it was Reagan's time or the first Bush presidency, I've forgotten which one. But under Lynn Cheney, they gave a grant called multiculturalism. You know, all this sounds very nice. Very nice, multicultural. So all the Indian parents are very happy now they're going to teach Ramayana. Obviously, when you read the Ramayana lessons, and we've quoted from that, the whole Ramayana lesson is what we call an anti-Ram song, by Dalits, by Muslims, by women, by all the people that you are this, you're that, you're a bad guy, you're, you know, whatever, everything blamed on Ram for this. So, and this is for middle school, high school type students in this country, you know. So this kind of material exists, and if you look at the funding mechanism, there was one guy in the National Endowment of Humanities who was in charge of their South Asia program. I reached him, he got very angry with me, so we had this exchange. And then I put it out in some discussion list that this is what this guy is saying. So he then got more angry with me. And then later I found out that he'd become a big shot scholar in Johns Hopkins. In fact, at one point, one of the leaders in South Asian studies in Johns Hopkins. So our people don't even know who's who that we're dealing with. Recently, an Indian group from California organized some event in Washington to talk about the international politics and Hinduism and India and all that. And they thought that they're inviting this guy because he's very well spoken and he speaks good Indian language and he's very polite and all that. So they invited this same guy. They had no background about his work. So the book is also trying to give you an introduction to who's who among such people, so that you are careful. You can refer to, you look at the index and you'll see names of people. You'll see more than 100 names of individuals and organizations that we have tracked that are part of these kind of activities. So Dalit Freedom Network then, starting in the US, they created an Indian affiliate, then they created a British affiliate, Belgian affiliate, they have affiliates in Europe and India. And they have many events going on. So we've attended some of their events, let's just leave it at that. We've attended some of their events, we have their resolutions, their proceedings. And they are very, very clearly on a radicalization of Dalits agenda. There's no doubt about it. Radicalization of Dalits as sort of an angry community within India who are angry at the nation, who can be sparked and energized and turned on into some direction. I found that recently they've been successful in getting some legislation through in Europe, and their next goal, within the next few months, they will start lobbying in Washington to put some bills to, and also UN. So they're trying to put India on the, as a kind of a list of countries that have this problem that can cause sanctions. And then what they really would like is that India has to get a good certificate health clearance from a certain organization, which will be run by people they have planted. So the government, the way we will be sold out, is that we'll always be at the mercy of these people. And they will in exchange want some extract something out of us. And if we don't please them and satisfy them and comply, then we could have sanctions. So this is kind of an insidious situation. Then there is a Gospel for Asia, which is a Dallas-based organization that is run by an Indian, and he's very anti-Hindu. I have a lot of his videos and all the talks he's given here and in India. And he's raised something like $35 million a year sometimes. He's raising a good deal of money, most of it going to South India. So we found that among the churches, they're not all like that. Different churches have different plans and different levels of activism in this regard. The worst that we found, the most, for the problem of embarrassing India internationally and taking legal action against India, we found that the Lutheran Church, based, not US one, but the one in Northern Europe, Germany, and Scandinavian countries, has been the most active, the most radical. They've been organizing conferences. One was held in Thailand on India's Dalit problem. You wonder, why is Lutheran Church of Scandinavia interested in conference in Thailand on India's Dalit problem? And they've been doing this in Europe also. So they built a 25-year plan long ago, and they're following it up. So this is different than our groups where everybody likes to put on a resolution, become very famous, get his name in the paper, and then they've forgotten about it. I have yet to see, and this is true, I have yet to see a Hindu organization where they start the meeting by reviewing the resolutions passed last time and giving a status report on where things are and holding people accountable. That if last time you made this resolution, what did you do about it? And you made that resolution, what is the progress on it? And that's how you do it in the corporate world, or in any professional organization. You don't get away by making a resolution and throwing it in the trash. You then have to act on it. So we don't act on it, but there it's remarkable how well it is tracked, like really professional standard of management going on. So that is Lutheran Church. There's an appendix on that and a whole lot of articles on what the Lutheran Church is up to and how they're part of this whole thing. And then there is the US Commission on International Religious Freedom. This is a commission which was set up during, there was an act called International Religious Freedom Act, signed by President Clinton. They had been arguing, the Christian right, Pat Robertson and his people had been arguing and mobilizing this act. And by religious freedom, they mean force the other country to open the doors for evangelism. That is their idea of religious freedom. So this Religious Freedom Act, Clinton signed, not because Clinton necessarily wanted to, but he was weak at a certain point, needed some favors from the other side, their votes for his, his bills, and they put in this on the agenda, and it wasn't a big deal, so he signed this International Religious Freedom Act. And under this act, they've set up the US Commission on International Religious Freedom. I think it's chapter 15, the whole chapter is on US government role in all these as a next part of the nexus. So this US Commission on Religious Freedom, the job is it works for the US Congress. It's a permanent commission, and it has around 12 or 15 or some number of commissioners who are very, very powerful people, because they get to decide, they can have a hearing on a particular event in a particular country, or a particular accusation or bias in a certain country. And they're not accountable to anybody for how they choose this. If I were to say, I want you to have a hearing on how some Christians are doing something abusive, they don't even have to answer back. But if 3 or 4 Christians write a affidavit and send it to them, they can have a whole hearing. And they have powers because they can advise the president to put a country on sanctions, economic sanctions. They have the authority to do that. And they put India on the watch list. India is on the watch list along with some countries like Cuba, North Korea, Afghanistan, lacking religious freedom. Yeah. Countries that have a problem of religious freedom, don't have religious freedom. Now this is very interesting, because while there are so many problems that India has that I, as an Indian, am concerned about, I never felt that lack of religious freedom is a problem for India. I felt that there is no problem of religious freedom in India. There are many other problems. So to select India as a handful of countries, put him on the watch list, is absolutely scandalous that we let this happen. So this has been the area of work which is summarized here. One of the books we used is a book by a Christian, Pradeep Ninian Thomas, I think is the name, but it's referenced here in the book, in my book, on Christian media in India. They study these things. These are academic. They not only have so much activity, they have people whose job is to study, and then others' job is to evaluate it. It's very systematically done. So he is writing where they've succeeded, where they have failed. And he's writing on who are some of the heroes of this Christian infiltration into media in India, and how these heroes are recognized. We have annual meetings in different parts of the world, and the best writers who are giving a Christian spin are called from all over the world. They give recognition, they give talks, they have workshops, they teach each other tips, how to do this job better. So there's a whole management program to manage the Christianization or the Christian spin on media in India. And in fact, a book that gives a report, and you can go to India and buy it for a few $100s. I have a copy of it. So this is very open information that you can compile if you really want to do that. So this is, in a nutshell, what is going on. Now, this U.S. Commission on Religious Freedom has not a single Hindu. They had one Hindu, Preeta Bansal. After we lobbied quite a lot, they got one Hindu. And she lasted a couple of years and then left because she was the only person and outvoted, and it was not easy to get things through. Most of them are fairly right-wing, extreme right-wing Christian type people who have had a history with World Vision. Some of them were president, vice president of World Vision. People of that kind are running this US Commission. And even after Obama came into power, one of my disappointments, which I've mentioned, is the way the Obama administration has been very complicit in this regard. They did not do house cleaning, get rid of all those guys and put in really the people who would represent all the world religions in a proper, fair way. They haven't done that. And actually some of the policies have become worse in terms of US government supporting foreign evangelism. This business of US government supporting foreign evangelism is not secret, it's not a controversial statement. Many academic books have referenced. I have a whole shelf of such books on export of the gospel as a part of US strategy. There was a Wall Street Journal article some years ago that I've referenced called Export of Evangelism as US Foreign Policy. That was the title, the front page, on how that is part of US foreign policy. That whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever it is, exporting Christianity is part of long-term foreign policy. Because the view that is held is that Christianizing a country is soft power. It is US soft power. They become more amenable to our way of thinking if they are Christianized. But I'm arguing that actually if you weaken the Vedic substratum of Indian society, you'll actually create a chaos which would backfire on the US in a big way. That is the argument that I'm giving in my book. Now, an interesting point I want to make is, and I'll be finished in just 5 minutes. If you go to a McDonald's in India, let's say you go to a small McDonald's restaurant in India, and there may be 20 employees, you don't think of it as a minority establishment. Just because there are 20 people doesn't mean it's a minority establishment. Because you do not evaluate that one restaurant in isolation. You look at the restaurant along with all McDonald's worldwide, and you say, well, they've got tens of thousands of restaurants, this is one of them, and McDonald's is tens of billions of dollars multinational, and so every little restaurant in isolation may be a small minority in a town which has hundreds of restaurants. They may look like a minority, but they're not entitled to any minority privileges because they're part of a global empire. They're part of a global thing. So if you use the same logic, and if in Nagaland or some other place, let's say there's a Baptist church, it may look like it's a minority by itself. But if you see it is a subsidiary and a branch office of a global majority, of a global, huge, billions of dollars empire, very powerful, it is not a minority. So the question of whose minority is being challenged in this book. I am saying that numerical numbers within a small geographical area is not the right criteria for deciding who's a minority entitled to privileges. If it may be a minority locally, but it is run and operated and governed by a global nexus somewhere else that gives them the money, that appoints their leaders, that gives them the ideology, that monitors them, tracks them, gives them political, legal support, all the things that corporate headquarters does for a multinational. If that is how they're set up, then they are part of a global majority, and they're part of a foreign nexus. They should not be entitled. We should have freedom to let them do what they do, but we should not be giving them some special privileges because their royalty is somewhere else. Then let them be looked after by somebody else because that is where the royalty is. So this would change the whole minority rights if this could be legally challenged. The whole status of the definition of a minority, if they are foreign controlled, then they should not be entitled to being a minority. And the final point I'll make, and then I'll close, is that China also has faced similar Western intervention attempts, but it has not acquiesced, it has not apologized. Just like every year there is a human rights report on India that says that this is the problem of human rights going on in India, and while in the case of India there's an apology and they are embarrassed, there's also a similar report about China, but within 2 weeks after such a report comes out about China, China publishes its own report on US human rights violations. So that is the way to do it. And for 10 years, you can go back. You can go back for 10 years and find that every time there's a US condemnation of Chinese human rights, they have a report which US media won't cover, but you can get these reports. China has a report on world human rights problems, they blame US on it. And India, so it means that they have an ongoing operation watching, because they're saying, who the heck are you to blame us? We also have things we're blaming you for. So this is something where a certain audacity and a certain spine and a certain kshatriyata would be required on the part of our leaders, and unfortunately that is not the case. You cannot convince an ambassador or a consul general even to attend a talk like this, even to receive a copy of a book like this, because he's very embarrassed. And these are the people who are supposed to protect us. So when naive people come to me and say, well, why aren't you getting help from the government? I'm saying, well, maybe the government is the problem. So that is really... So thank you very much. I will stop and then we will have more questions. Thank you.